Good morning and welcome to panel one of day 3 of our 5th Streaming Media Connect. This is our 5th virtual conference. Thanks for joining us. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the editor of Streaming Media and the program chair for Streaming Media Connect and also for Streaming Media West, which we are planning to have in person in the first week of November. Hope to see some of you there. If you're wondering if you're going to be able to make it, I always like to remind people that unlike IBC, we have a real beach in Huntington Beach. The program's online. You can click in the chat on the link that Steve Nathans-Kelly just popped in there to find out more about it. And we're going to be adding the speakers in the next week or so. A couple of program notes and housekeeping notes before we jump right into today's first panel on live streaming in the new normal. Live captions are turned on if you find them distracting. If you're seeing them, we've noticed that not everyone sees them, but if you're seeing them and want to turn them off, you can go to the bottom of your screen, click on live transcript, and there should be an option to hide subtitles. We also ask that you use the Q&A if you have any questions for our panelists. Chris Pfaff, our moderator, will be checking the Q&A for questions throughout the session, or we'll come to the questions at the end, but that's the best place to put your questions. Finally, everyone who attends this morning is eligible to win an Amazon gift card for $50. We'll be announcing the winner. We'll pick the name from random at the end of the panel discussion. That actually wraps it up for the housekeeping note. Oh, except for one very important one. I'd like to thank our diamond sponsor, Limelight Networks. Limelight has sponsored a number of these Streaming Media Connect virtual conferences, and we appreciate the fact that they are also sponsoring this one and helping us bring all of these sessions to you for the last couple of days and today. In case you're wondering, all of our sessions will be available for on-demand viewing online. You can check next week. Go to the Streaming Media website, click on videos, and click on conference videos, or on the link that Steve Nathans-Kelly may or may not put in the chat right now. So I think that does it now for my housekeeping notes. And with that, I'd like to welcome Chris Pfaff. Chris.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks so much. It's great to be here
again. Yeah, and I will just pass it on over to you to take it away.
Well, thank you. I accept that baton. And
all right.
Again, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Steve, and the entire team at Streaming Media. And this is great to be back for Streaming Media Connect 2021. This is live events in the new normal. Of course, many of us have not had the chance to experience live theater or music, at least in the way that we used to. And our 3 panelists are some of the leading players in the streaming entertainment space, the live space. Some of that might be on demand, as you'll get into, but that has filled a huge gap over the last 18 months. I'd like to first welcome Bonnie Comley from BroadwayHD. Bonnie.
Hey, good
welcome.
Morning. Thank you, Chris.
It's good to see you here. We also have Jordan Gremli from DICE. Jordan.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. And Fabrice Sergent from BandsInTown. Fabrice.
Hey, Chris. Good morning, everyone.
Great. Now, Jordan, are you back in town now?
Yeah, in Western New Jersey, technically. So like in the
right.
New
So
York
we're all
area.
Basically New Yorkers here. So
So
we're all going to be very chauvinistic about the fact that the live entertainment space is very New York centric, as you can imagine. I was supposed to go to my first live concert since 2019 last night, but it was moved to 9/11 at Jones Beach. That's Cold War Kids and Kings of Leon. But I think I'm going to see King Crimson next Thursday at the Forest Hills Stadium. So Jordan, what was the last live show that you saw? Of course, you're in the business, but
yeah, we were talking about this before, and I had trouble. It felt like it was a long time ago. I was at So Far Sounds before I was at DICE. So when lockdown happened, I was going to a lot of So Far shows. So it was a small, intimate So Far event at a distillery in Brooklyn, I believe. Yeah.
Wow.
Right before
there
lockdown.
we go. And how about you, Fabrice?
Well, before the pandemic, I was at Carnegie Hall watching a show of Iggy Pop and Jane Birkin that played Carnegie Hall or Beacon Theater. And my last show was at the Brooklyn Monarch in Brooklyn to watch an electronic music group called Who Made Who. And that was like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and Bonnie, what was the last live theater or music that you saw?
I just saw something in the Hamptons. I went to Bay Street Theater, did Camelot outside. So that was, again, like getting used to being
Right.
together again. It was very emotional, wearing your mask. I actually,
Yeah. Being a little
Um,
distance, perhaps. Oh, fantastic. Oh,
masking up, there's the drama league. So yeah, and but pre-pandemic, I was involved with 2 shows that were in previews on Broadway and were days away from opening in March of 2020.
which
So
ones
I was
are we
involved
talking
with,
about?
The Minutes, the new Tracy Letts play.
Tracy
And I
Letts
had
Play, yeah.
this tiny little investment in Six, the musical that was opening.
Yeah, so that Henry VIII, and
Yes.
that's when does that go up?
We start previews again in September, and I believe the opening night is October 4th.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah.
For me, I believe the last rock concert I saw was Elvis Costello at the Capitol Theater in late October of 2019. I've seen some classical music since then, including Marriage of Figaro the month before the pandemic at the Met. And the Met is back, for those who don't know, the Metropolitan Opera, that is. So enough of our chauvinistic New York talk, but let's talk very quickly and go around, because I think one of the biggest things for all of you is that the pandemic, in a weird way, has really magnified your business models and possibly sharpened them. And Fabrice, you had a great run with the BandsInTown Plus and all of your packages. Talk about that, and for those who don't know, explain what that was, because I just thought it was fantastic, and of course, that. Many of us, of course, have known of BandsInTown for years, but I thought that was a great way to really take your artist to the next level and grow your audience.
Well, look, when the pandemic hit, we had to find solutions to help artists make a living, or at least explore new revenue opportunities, and certainly to stay in touch with their fans and just express themselves creatively. So we took a few initiatives. One, we added live stream as an event within BandsInTown. And so during the pandemic, we promoted for free about 100,000 events that artists listed on the platform. We also launched a Twitch channel, which became hugely successful in 2020. It was about 35 million unique viewers, booked about 1,000 shows on this channel, booked and programmed 1,000 shows. And then we launched BandsInTown Plus, which was a content series on subscription, where we booked about 100 artists, from Phoebe Bridgers, Jeff Tweedy, very eclectic, mostly indie artists, fast rising artists and emerging artists, to help them, go back on stage. It was really one of the first time that they were offered to do a show, actually, within a year. So it was very emotional, very strong, and it helped also BandsInTown stay relevant to its fan, because at that time, otherwise people may have just stopped using the platform during that period. We actually didn't see that at all, quite the opposite. And we felt that fans really understood how important it was to show artists some love and to engage with us and with the artists we presented.
And Bonnie, I've been following what you have been doing, and I know Gio Masali, and I've seen over the last year what you guys have been up to. But explain how the pandemic really moved you to where you are today.
Well, BroadwayHD is a platform for theater fans and soon to be theater fans. And I think that, we have done some live streaming in the past, but we're basically an on-demand platform, subscription-based. So when the pandemic hit back in March of 2020, we had different live performing arts organizations that hadn't shut down yet around the country reach out to us and say, you know what, we're going to get shut down. Can you please help us? Can you stream off of BroadwayHD? So what we did was we created sort of a backdoor platform for them, but, and we did it with a couple of different theater organizations. But what happened was within days, we had 90 different theater organizations reaching out to us and saying, could you please help us? And we said, we can't that's not our main business. So to use all of our resources for that. So basically what we did was that we just helped as many people as we could. And we gave them, sort of the this is how you do it kind of thing, because you're looking at, performing arts venues that had never done anything with streaming before, that were now trying to turn themselves into TV studios overnight. and it's hard enough when you're an existing TV studio to do it right, but to like, then, okay, let's just try and capture something really quick. So a couple of other, the Facebooks and the YouTubes and all that just started to spring up with things. But, with Broadway HD, we just really doubled down on what we are, which is the Broadway shows, the Broadway caliber shows. And we just, we had a pipeline of content for about 8 months that we just kept rolling out. And, Broadway HD's, position in all of this, our place, because we are, in addition to being a streaming service, what we are is we're a service industry, service business of the Broadway industry. And that entire industry shut down in one night. Just 100,000 people just in New York City in those 41 Broadway theaters gone overnight, and they're still not all back up. So, our place was, what can we do to support that? And what we did was, what we've always done, which is we are a constant, a 24/7 reminder of why people want to go to Broadway shows. So we're constantly keeping them thinking about Broadway as an art form, as a genre, as their entertainment. And we're, that's what we were doing 6 years ago when we launched. That's still what we're doing. And then in the pandemic, when we needed other content, what we were doing was looking to other countries that were then able to open and grabbing some content from Australia, from the UK, in these COVID tested, bubbles that they were still creating some theater. So some of it is without audience, but it's still, a stage play, a stage musical that we were able to capture. And that's what we're doing going forward. And as far as like subscribers, Broadway HD, like the rest of the streaming world, saw everybody, what else was there to do, in lockdown, but every streaming service, your subscribers just exploded in a positive way. And so, and that's where we're still going, is we're still just growing, and people that weren't aware of us before are certainly aware of us now.
Yes, and it didn't hurt, of course, that you were featured on the cover of Streaming Media Magazine.
That was my turning point. That was my moment.
I think it really was your close-up moment.
There you go.
It was a fabulous story too. So the audience here, all 77 of them, 79 now, by the way. We have some latecomers here. The ushers just took them to their seats. Hate those people. They come in late, right after the big number. Anyway, but no.
We don't seat them in the theater when they do that.
What's that?
We don't seat them right away.
I know.
They have to wait in the back.
They have to wait in the
until there's
anteroom.
some sort of dark moment where you can then sit them back down into their seat.
Exactly. That's right.
That's the benefit of
I've had the shame of sitting in the anteroom at the Met, having come late for, it sucks. You just feel like a loser.
I'm
but
sorry,
anyway,
I don't have the
Jordan.
issues. I was the cover girl of it. It was awesome. It was like,
Yeah, you were. I'm surprised you're not holding it up right now.
I should have. I missed my cue for that. We'll have to.
Yeah, you did.
Get Eric to go.
By the way,
one
speaking
on
of
the way
cues,
out.
you reminded me. This is my mask, my Players Club mask. So you had your Drama League. I have my Players Club mask. I'm surprised that Fabrice doesn't have a BandsInTown mask. And Jordan, you got to work on that Dice mask. But Jordan, let's talk about Dice, because you guys, Dice, seem to be like the poster child for pandemic success. I've known of you guys for years, but then suddenly, boom, spring 2020 hits. And among other things, you did this unbelievable production of Nick Cave at Alexandra Palace in London, which I watched like 3 times, because I am a Nick Cave fan, but that was shot, and you guys should win every award for that. But talk about that trajectory from being this community ticketing app to now what you're doing. And you are part of this North American expansion, for those who don't know, of Dice, and you joined fairly recently, correct?
Yes, correct. About 3 months ago.
So talk about how the pandemic has really expanded and sharpened your business model.
For sure. Yeah. So Dice was kind of founded as a way to get people out more and to make it really easy for fans to get out and go to concerts and go to shows and find their new favorite artist, and find that their favorite artist, the Kings of Leon and Cold War Kids, are playing down the street, and just make it really easy from a tech perspective. No crazy fees, surprise fees, no scalpers, just make it very easy for that to happen. And Dice, got really good at that. And, that's kind of been the ethos for its entire history. And it's absolutely still our ethos. And so when COVID hit in March of last year, the thought was kind of, let's just do that, but for live streaming. There's tons of streams out there. There's lots of different, artists. There's lots of different kind of production, people sitting in the bedroom playing the guitar, all the way up to Nick Cave at Alley Pally putting on an amazing, performance. Let's support as much of that as we can to give our fans and give our users as much choice and as much, as much content as possible. So through the last year, we've supported on over 6,000 streams, and it's been different levels. You go to dice.fm/TV and you can, make your own event, and then you just use us as kind of the ticketing provider, and we can just handle that for you. Or, a deeper partnership like we did, like with the Nick Cave experience and with Laura Marling and others. So like you said, I started about 3 months ago, this is what we'll talk about, I'm sure, on this panel, but kind of to see what happens next. We have this platform, we have an amazing way for artists and creators of all kinds to live stream. And so I'm coming in heading up the artist development team specifically to think about, I'll be the first one to say it on the panel, hybrid and how we move into that world. I'm surprised it took us 17 minutes to say that word. I'm honored that I'm the first person.
We were getting there, but
I know.
Perfect guy to talk about.
I took the lead on that one. But to think about how Dice works in the new normal, in the new world. But then also with my background working on artist services at Spotify, and working artist programming and artist and fan development at Spotify, and so far, my thought also goes to how can we use live streaming and the Dice ticketing platform, and then other services and products that we'll build to help artists build their careers specifically. And so it gets really interesting really fast with artists and live streaming, especially now, because you can really think about how to put all these pieces together in interesting ways, which I'm sure that's what we're here to talk about today. So it's a really interesting time to join Dice for sure, and really exciting time.
Right, and you referenced So Far Records, but of course you spent some good time with Spotify and SiriusXM, so you're seeing sort of all sides of this, from literally distribution, performing rights, streaming, obviously in a more kind of almost traditional radio side of this, but that career building. I mean, Fabrice, you had people who were doing gigs from their bedrooms, for God's sakes, and doing well. Yeah. And this is, long after, people like Erykah Badu were doing that, and that was just Trey cool and hip and all that. But that just makes sense on a certain level, right? And you're servicing an incredible number of artists. And by the way, I think you also do some work with Dice as well, right, Fabrice?
Well, first, BandsInTown is the place to discover all events, regardless and completely agnostic of any ticketing company, any promoter, any geography. So right now you have about 500,000 upcoming events in the platform. And indeed, we do have agreements with Dice and with all the ticketing companies out there that provide either physical events or virtual events. So there are other virtual events producers in the marketplace that are adding their events to the BandsInTown ecosystem. Most of the events are added by 500,000 artists that have an account on BandsInTown for Artists and add themselves their events so that they make sure they get promoted. We just passed, I can release this number because it's not public yet, but we just passed 65 million registered users. We gained 5 million users in the last quarter. So just to say that fans are back. And so that's who we are. We really want to offer fans the broadest opportunity to either discover new artists or obviously never miss a show of the artist they love. However, in the live streaming environment, when we started, it was not very common to live stream. When I said that we did live stream ourselves 1,000 artists on our Twitch channel, most of the time we had to teach them how to do it. It was not like, it's that. First of all, you're streaming magazine, you know that it's not that easy to do a good show, to have no technical issues, to have the right sounds, to have the right image. It's not trivial. So that's the first thing that happened. And then when we launched BandsInTown Plus and we really booked venues and we programmed the artist and produced the artist in a much bigger way. Yes, that was a time when we evolved the format. but that was also for a different type of audience, right? We moved from, we did this programming not on Twitch, but on our own proprietary live streaming platform, because we always wanted to have at BandsInTown our own premium venue. And now we have it. It's called BandsInTown Plus. It works beautifully, and we are continuing actually to produce high quality shows on these platforms on a regular basis.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. I want to talk about the hybrid model, given the fact that we do have fans coming back now, and we've talked about some venues. Bonnie, you're occupying a really interesting space in a fascinating point in time, which is, of course, streaming and even shooting shows or even broadcasting has been done on a very limited basis on Broadway or in other major venues. And as you mentioned, you were working a lot, particularly with the West End, which made us all jealous. Andrew Lloyd Webber kind of opened that during the lockdown period. But do you see that way forward for whether it's production companies, theaters, associations, whether they're Broadway or the West End or regional theaters? I mean, because I think you're building, all three of you are building the expectation for that kind of package as something that's not even niche anymore. It might just be a different ticketing tier. Do you see that turning point now in theater?
It's definitely on its way in. I mean, to be specific about the hybrid piece, is it, on the, so there's the 41 Broadway theaters in Times Square. That's a different ecosystem than the 200 touring Broadway theaters that take the shows from those 41 theaters and then tour them around the country. And that takes about a year or sometimes two. So there's a couple different ecosystems here that we're talking about. Are we talking about, live streaming from those 41 Broadway theaters every night of, for 8 shows a week? I don't think so. I think we're a ways from that. And so that hybrid in New York City doesn't work, but the tours are usually something that originates from those 41 Broadway theaters and is later. So really, I think what we're looking at is, and what we're learning, and we're still trying to figure out as a, technology and streaming and, entertainment industry, is windowing. I mean, we saw this with, Scarlett Johansson saying, like, you damaged my, box office by going stream, so those conversations are being had. And I think that fits into the Broadway arena as well, of no Broadway producer is ever against doing a beautiful digital capture of their show. What they're against, where the fear is, rightly so, is that you have a $20 million musical and you put that exact same version online for somebody to stream on, like, a Broadway HD that's $100 a year for, for everything, versus that $125 seat for one seat in the theater. So it's more about the geo-blocking that's possible, about the windowing that's possible, about the other sort of distribution outlets that are possible. So I think that the Broadway community is now seeing that, and they're seeing the, that hybrid is different touch points for the same brand. And again, there's, 2 different brands going here. So there's the Broadway brand, which is the industry. And everybody, when you think of, Broadway, you think of those big, 50 people in the cast musicals. That's what most people around the world think of when they think of Broadway. And then there's the individual brands. So there's the Hamilton, there's the Wicked, there's the, the Lion King, there's those sorts of things. So there's, 2 sort of brand kind of things that are working. And I think that producers are realizing that there is multiple touch points for the show as a brand. So the live ticket to go into the theater for $125 is one touch point for that. Another is a digital capture, which is, to be clear, the difference between the digital capture and a Hollywood adaptation is Hamilton. So I think I'm going to guess everybody saw Hamilton already. Yes. It wasn't a real movie, as we say. It was go in while the audience is there and shoot what's going on that stage. A Hollywood adaptation was, to use Lin-Manuel Miranda as the composer again, as the mastermind behind the show, was in the Heights, which is a Hollywood movie. So there's those two different things that are very different. And I think that we can see that you can do the live in person, you can do a digital capture, you can do the Hollywood adaptation that's different than both of those other two, and you can do other shorter forms, or you can do what we're seeing now with Wicked, a concert. So it's giving you the songs, but it's not giving you the entire costume sets and the story that goes along with it. It's sort of the highlights thing. So there's multiple touch points for the same brand. And I think that everybody's seeing that. And it's really clear in this season, because out of the 30 shows in those 41 theaters that have been announced so far, 20 of them have the full out story streaming someplace. Yeah. So you've got Come From Away that's coming out as a digital capture. Hamilton's already out as a digital capture. American Utopia, the David Byrne, Springsteen's out. Passover is out. Lion King is an animated movie. West Side Story is an upcoming Spielberg movie, but it's also an older movie from 1950. Moulin Rouge is a movie that's out there. So there's these, you recognize the brand and you can say, I love that. So it's the same in a sense of a cast recording for a musical. You get the cast recording now before the show even comes out, and that propels you to go buy the ticket for the live, because as an audience, you get that those are different things. So it's the windowing and the different touch points within a brand of a show.
Right. I think, but I think that hybrid, and particularly the geo blocking and windowing, and we're working with MediaCon to develop these kinds of things for live events, and love to talk to you about that.
And to just touch really quickly on those other 200, because again, that you started off with we're all New Yorkers. So the 200 Broadway theaters and the other hundreds of regional theaters across the country are already selling subscriptions with ticketed hybrids of you can go to the theater or you can see some digital pieces. It's not the entire season that you're able to see. Not every show that's going to be in that theater will be live streamed in some way, but there's a version of it, of some of the shows. And the other thing is that the Broadway industry has picked up on really quick in the pandemic is the digital engagement. So this whole idea that you're giving them something, it might not be the entire show, but some other way that you're connecting them and introducing them to these shows before the show actually comes to their theater. And that is, leapfrogged, 100 years.
Yeah, it's go ahead, Fabrice.
Now, what strikes me with what Bonnie is explaining is the difference of maturity of the Broadway ecosystem and the rest of the music industry regarding live stream and these new opportunities. And that also comes from the fact that obviously Broadway is closer to theater and Hollywood than the rest of the music industry. Music has been music has been fragmented as an industry for the last 20 years. And because of the right structure and many things, it was very hard to come even close to this level of maturity that you discuss, Bonnie. And I'm really amazed and admire actually how advanced your ecosystem is versus the rest. What we can see from the pandemic is that fans and artists pivoted very quickly to live streaming. We did everything we could to evangelize, but when I see that, after a few months, you had 86% of our fans that watched the live streams, right? More than once a month. You had 53% that were watching more than 4 live streams, music live streams I'm talking about, every month, so once a week, right? So in direct competition in a way with the Netflix of the world, if we think about it. On the artist side, it was even stronger. I mean, I'm looking at surveys results that we pulled. 70% of our artists did a live stream on a monthly basis. And 85% said that they're going to continue to do so. So from a fan and artist perspective, and as I said, we promoted 100,000 live streams, including the great ones that DICE did and others. But that's a lot of things, a lot of live streaming events for an industry that was almost in existence before. And frankly, I guess everyone on this panel would probably agree that we didn't like live streams before the pandemic. It was not a great thing. So the first thing that happened is this maturity on the artist and fan side of all ages, by the way, on the fan side. I can tell you that it was not an 18 to 25 things. It was 18 to whatever, 60, or I mean, we had all ages. And that was definitely the case. Now, what we're seeing, and that's how this, we long term, our vision is that live streaming will be probably to live music what television became to sport, like a global opportunity, a broader opportunity for the performance to be discovered and to be watched. It might become the new GA overhaul, all right, the new general admission. But it's going to take time, and it's going to go through stages. And that's why now we are seeing our industry, the live music industry, experimenting with it. And to your points, that's what we call hybrid, for example. Yes, we're going to have the time when shows will be hybrid. Some shows will be hybrid. We're seeing lots of agents and artists adding as a last show at the end of a tour, a good live stream for all of those who wants to watch again, or all of those who missed it. At BandsInTown, because we have data about where the fans of the artist are located, we are showing artists how many fans are left out of the tour based on the location of the dates, and what is the live streaming opportunity in terms of business if the artist wants to offer these fans an opportunity to see the show, literally. So there are things, and it's going to probably take 3 to 5 years for this industry to mature to the level that Bonnie described, and to discover the right formats. But what I can find very exciting and super interesting is that the resilience of the artists, their creativity, their ability to fight for their living, and from the entire industry, frankly, was phenomenal. So the speed at which this industry is transforming itself is extraordinary. Is extraordinary. We're just witnesses. We are witnesses of a huge transformation, which again over time will become revolutionary, I think.
Yeah, I think that resiliency is not to be underestimated. You're dealing with people who do this for a living, who are working with managers and agents, and of course also have unions to deal with. And then we're going to get to the venue conversation in a second. But when you consider the enormity from a learning perspective, I mean, I think Brad Paisley said last year that it took 3 days for him to do the kind of setup to do some live streaming that took 6 hours previously. This is massive, as you said. But Jordan, just to get to what we were saying about hybrid, you're now in of course in this expansion mode, and of course you'll be having more relationships presumably with venues, particularly here in the States. How does that change things up for what you guys have been doing?
Yeah, it expands it. And the points that both Bonnie and Fabrice are making, I totally agree with, both in terms of, live streaming really makes live music more accessible to fans who can't get to a show for whatever reason, geographically or otherwise. And so as I'm thinking about this from, an artist development and artist fan base growth perspective, that's a huge opportunity to help an artist meet a bunch of new fans in cities and in places, and even age groups, demographics, like Fabrice was saying, where they wouldn't have been able to connect with those fans. So my job as heading up artist development is to work with all the new venue partners that we're signing, and also other partners around the business and around the music industry, and managers and agents and everybody to help artists do that. And I completely agree with what Fabrice was saying, was that it has just been fascinating to watch everybody figure this out in real time over the past year.
And of course you come from
experiment and put the different pieces together.
Yeah.
I consider myself lucky to be a part of that.
No, I mean, you're a part of a new industry as much as this history. I mean, we are at that pivot point, and you can look at other moments in history, as we said. I mean, Fabrice talked about television, but I think that we're certainly at that period where the discovery process, which has certainly lived in the digital domain for 20 plus years, but that was largely for music, the province, of course, of radio, which, of course, Jordan, you've spent a lot of time in music discovery. I mean, not that when I'm driving around, I'm not listening to, say, WFUV or BGO or anything else that's bringing the new, but when it comes to streaming, certainly I'm more likely to go to what you guys are doing. To really look at that, and certainly from a geographical perspective, because I think the global audience side of this for me is what's broken through. And Fabrice, you mentioned sports, of course, that when that has been a huge driver for global revenues for sports. I think it will certainly be for theater and for music. But I want to talk about venues here for a second. The Independent Venue Association has worked hard to ensure that smaller, historic, beloved music venues that are critical parts of local communities in the US are able to continue after more than a year of lockdown. Talk about your relationships with venues. And I want to start with you, Fabrice. Obviously, Bonnie, we've talked about the theaters, but that's important to talk about. Fabrice, are there particular, outside of what somebody might do in their bedroom, are there things that BandsInTown is looking to do to partner with venues to help them not just recoup lost revenue, but also grow those audiences on the streaming side?
First of all, we've been a historic partner of venues as we promote, as I said, about 2.5 to 3.5 million shows a year, for which we send about 100 million emails and push notifications to fans every month. And out of which 50% of the ticket purchase, we send about 10 to 12, 15 million people buying tickets every month. And guess what? Because of our discovery engine, because of our technology and algorithm, we'll be able to not only to generate about 50% of this ticket purchase toward venues playing artists of less than 100,000 followers. In other words, our engine is a massive discovery engine facilitating ticket sales for the smallest venues. And so that's, and obviously the smaller artists and the emerging artists. And we're very proud of that. And by the way, that's why we also partnered a lot with DICE, because that's part of your core group of venues that you monetize. And so we always loved pushing and promoting DICE venues and events. But that's how we work. So we've been a very large contributor to ticket sales for all these independent venues. That continues obviously today more than ever, as we are back to pre-pandemic level of ticket purchase. That's the first things. That's what keeps us awake at night. Frankly, we're always happy to help the biggest artists sell tickets at Madison Square Garden or the biggest venues. But our pride is to really tweak this algorithm. Frankly, it's tweaked to favor discovery of the smaller and the emerging ones. So the second thing is, when we indeed for live streaming, now we're at a time when fans are expecting a greater experience. So we do promote and produce shows at these smaller venues. And we usually use the smaller ones, obviously, because they are actually more fit for live stream, right? So out of the 100 shows that we produced, I mean, we talked about the one with Jeff Tweedy, for example, in Chicago. We talked about, there's a lot of shows that happen at iconic venues during the BandsInTown Plus concert series. And I think that for the smaller venues, it's indeed a greater opportunity than for the bigger venues, to be honest with you. For example, I was very impressed what Le Poisson Rouge put together in the pandemic. So launched their own subscription. They also put a lot of live stream together. So at the venue, they've been super creative. Or Peter Shapiro with Broken Ball and all the. So there's a number of industry and small venues that took initiative. City Winery is another great example, working with Mandolin on live streaming and hybrid concerts. So I won't name them all, and I don't want to miss any names or make anybody jealous, but we love them all, and we are supporting them as much as we can.
Yeah, that's great. I've known Peter Shapiro for a long time, and of course, City Winery really almost pioneered this if you go back to the late 90s. But
yeah,
these
yeah.
are,
You remember what Michael Dorf was doing? I knew that.
yeah, exactly,
Absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely. He was absolutely the absolute pioneer of that. He was.
Yeah, no, I mean, literally. And Digital Club Network was part of that too. But Jordan, you know, I mean, as you mentioned, the venue side of this expands. Bonnie, you know, I think that some smaller regional theaters, you know, need to benefit from this in certain ways, and I would think that their learning has grown. But I want to, you know, ask you to talk a little bit about, all three of you now, sort of the production side of this and the technology, because Bonnie, and I thought it was really well documented in the cover story. You've created, I don't want to say a template, but a really interesting way to bring live theater to people in a streaming domain that's not just a 1 or 3 camera lockdown. If you talk a bit more about your production and the technology as well.
Well, sure. I can't remember who it was that they already mentioned, like artists fighting, you know, and artists have always been fighting. So those artists are everybody that's in the, you know, the arts and culture sector. And if we, you know, sort of back up a bit, because from, you know, from the beginning of time when people were entertaining people, there's always been that the artist as the outsider, the artist as fighting, the artist as starving. And I think that, you know, we're finally, you know, recognizing that that doesn't have to be the case. And, you know, people don't pay attention until you're making money. So it wasn't until about 5 years ago that the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Economic Bureau actually recognized arts and culture as a sector. You know, so in the same way that we recognize the airlines as a sector, as the, you know, Hollywood as a sector, the arts and entertainment, arts and culture, so that's theater, dance, opera. Those were suddenly, you know, with statistics, what we are able to do with the internet of, you know, of actually looking at something and being able to understand what their contribution is to the national domestic product. You know, so it's not until you actually put a big price tag on it that people suddenly say, oh, wait a minute, we need to pay attention to that. So we either need to get involved in it or we need to be part of it. And I think that, you know, what happened with, you know, that sort of, you know, 5 years ago of being recognized as an industry, as a sector of the, you know, of what the gross national product is here, that set us up for when the pandemic shut everything down, that people started looking at these things and saying, wait a minute, if all of these things go down, do you realize the impact that this has on the economy? And so, you know, so the grants that you're talking about, it's the Shuttered Venues Operator grants that was $16 billion that was approved. And so all of the, you know, the organizations, these venues that fit into that, you know, required, you know, whatever the, you know, the requirements were that you can apply. And it was, you know, 45% of your gross earned revenue for a year that you could apply for. And that was what's in this $16 billion. So that's not just Broadway. And there was a cap on it of 10 million. So you couldn't get more than 10 million. So Hamilton got 10 million. Lion King, I don't think qualified because they're a public company. So public companies didn't qualify, but all the other Broadway producers and the Broadway theater owners all were able to, you know, to grab a piece of this pie. And it was because they're such a, you know, it's the economic impact is huge. So just in New York City at the beginning, I said, you know, when the pandemic shut Broadway, just Broadway, that's not off Broadway, that wasn't the Metropolitan Opera, that wasn't anybody else, 100,000 workers down and out. And, you know, with Cuomo and de Blasio, they've opened up New York City in June, but it opened up without Broadway. And we still don't see that, you know, it's $1 trillion economy just in New York City that is still damaged because we can't get that Broadway community up and running full speed ahead yet. And it's not going to be there yet. But that, of recognizing what the economic impact is for not just Broadway, because Broadway is sort of like this own ecosystem, as I pointed out, but that plays out in the 200 touring Broadway theaters across the country. Because if you look at what that means, not just the economic impact, but you look at those communities, and communities that have big arts institutions in them have higher rates of high school graduation, higher rates that those people go to college, higher rates that they're going to vote, a more cohesive community. So they end up being a safer community. So it was about 5 years ago that all of this stuff was sort of set up and recognized as an economic driver and as a cohesion to the communities that these venues are in. And so that's why this $16 billion grant was actually approved back in, I guess it was like June or July, which is huge. So I think like that sort of like sets everything up about the importance of this, so that then that, trickles down to individual artists, individual organizations. And, one of the things that we haven't really mentioned here is, that was like the government grant part and how we fit in, but the pricing part. So when the pandemic hit and everybody started going online, the pricing was all over the place, from like, oh, drop something in our tip jar, to $2,500 for, it's going to be only, 3 nights available kind of thing. And that they were all over the place. But I think that, that you can find that the ones that really made the money with their tip jars and what their admission were the ones that could communicate what their mission was.
Absolutely.
Whether it was an individual artist or an organization, if you related to that person, they would, they would say, pay what you can, and people were giving them 10 grand.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, Marie's Crisis had a Facebook, channel, and they were doing Facebook Live for hours and hours, which leads to my next question, which is, and then we'll get to your questions in a second. How has, I mean, whether it's YouTube streamers, Facebook streamers, even TikTok, has that crossed into your business, or are they complementary? I mean, what do you think, Jordan?
In terms of people that we work with, or to like the creators and artists?
Yeah, I mean, your artists, I mean, is that complementary? Is it competitive? Is it?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I think that, I mean, just in general, I think that live streaming going forward needs to be complementary to other parts of the music industry, whether that's live or a TikTok presence or Instagram in general. I think that's going to be key again. And that's how I approach it from a, holistic artist development perspective. And when we think of, when we're learning data about ticket buyers at our DICE venues, how can we use that to inform live streaming and that kind of like crossover kind of stuff, and to also on the production side, I mean, Fabrice's point is right. It's right. Streaming is hard. It's a heavy lift in terms of spending a lot of money and cameras and all that stuff. Or it's somebody, with a phone and it falls over and it's endearing and it's really low quality. And that's also great.
Or it could be really high quality.
Totally. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So we've been thinking a lot with our venue partners on the production side, especially about how to make that easier for artists so that we can use that specifically to help them build their careers. And then to the other point about platforms and YouTube, it's about, do we think about putting out some of that content on other platforms after it's live? And the waterfall strategy is talked about in the music industry side, where you start with a live performance, and I'm in New Jersey, and I can see what's going on right now at Zebulon in Los Angeles, or Moth Club in London, and that's cool. That's really great. But then what if I miss it, or what if I'm asleep because of the time zone? Do you rebroadcast? Do you put up a clip and say, like that's the kind of thing to figure out.
I can see how that, and I think that Vonnie, I mean, you talked about what you can give people, a little bits and pieces way back in the day. If you're here in New York, you'd see the promos and ads for Broadway shows, and that was just about it. But Fabrice, I mean, how do you view those other platforms in terms of your business?
Well, we get, as I said, artists list their event. We're agnostic of the platform where they played from. Number one, things that contrary to Broadway, I think that we, as live music, we have an advantage, which is that artists can be as creative as they want and as relevant as they want, as long as the fans love it. In other words, there shouldn't be any preset standards in our imagination, in their imagination for sure,
Totally.
onto what is good or what is wrong.
Yeah.
Is it I remember what Jordan mentioned, accessibility. Yes, it's important because it make all these shows accessible for people who may not have the financial resources to buy the tickets and come to the show in person, who may be far away, who just don't have time. You know, there are many good reasons. But what I find most fascinating is that when artists started to stream off their living room, as you mentioned it, you know, the fans really loved it, and we should listen first to the fans. There was something that the fans loved, that I'm not saying that it's only the living room and the ability to discover the environment of the artist, but there's something around that. What fans loved really was the approachability of the artist. They were not overproduced. There was no perfect makeup. The kids sometimes were just passing in front of the camera. We did a show with this great DJ, actually, Black Coffee, from his home in South Africa. And, you know, his kids started running around the DJ booth, and it drove him crazy a little bit. But the fans loved it. So the lessons should be learned, right? The lesson, I think, is that, yes, it should be complementary. So there, again, the creativity should be king. And so what the artist should not lose sight on the fact that what fans are looking for in terms of live streaming, it's not low production necessarily, it's not the living room necessarily, but it's approachability. Mm-hmm. It's a different kind of format. It's not necessarily, that's why I'm saying it's different from Broadway, because on Broadway you have to actually shoot the play, right? And make it, you know, watchable basically, which is kind of a challenge. And with an artist, the artist can decide to do a meet and greet. We did tons of meet and greets, which were extremely successful. Listening party, you know, song by song, discovery, and chat with the fans. I had a rapper that started to ask the fans to drop words in the chat, which I won't do in this live stream, but the words in the chat, and start rapping, literally creating a song live with the fans. So, and all of that is relevant. And so that's what live streaming opens as an opportunity for this industry.
It does. And now I want to move to questions. We're going to have extra time. We're going into overtime. I just got the word. So we'll have about another 12 minutes for your questions. And speaking of overtime, we have a great question from Jason Bergman. Do you see some type of hybrid approach where maybe a show will set out locally and then the venue or the promoter or the artist will offer a live streaming option, which is similar to how the NFL or other sports leagues would do blackouts if a game doesn't sell out? So what do you think, Bonnie?
You know, it's that hybrid thing that we were talking about, is like, do you do a concert version of it? Is there, you know, the highlights or a couple of scenes from the shows? You know, and I mean, with all of this, one of the things that I don't think any of us touched on was the rights. You know what I mean? So just because a venue has the right to do something for the stage version doesn't mean that you can bring cameras in and live stream it or capture it. So, you know, for my world, all begins and ends with, do you have the rights to bring a camera in here? So let's start with that. And a lot of times, you know, that idea that, is this the one that you want captured? So there's live streaming and then there's the capture. So the live stream, as we know, is the live, it goes out, and the, you know, the rights holders for a lot of these plays and musicals have made concessions during the pandemic to allow the middle school to do a version of, you know, West Side Story in the pandemic, because the kids aren't in the auditorium, the parents can't get there, the grandparents want to see, you know, so there was all these sort of concessions that were made for temporary live streams, that it was live stream while the kid is singing in a Zoom square. And that, you know, so those things. And then there's the capture. And what, you know, the rights holders of the world want is the ultimate show, the ultimate production being captured. You know, you don't want the middle school production is the one that gets captured, as fabulous as that may be, you know, so it's the quality control of it that's really the thing with when you talk, about someplace outside of the Broadway arena. Broadway is entirely unionized. And so that gives us at Broadway HD and anybody that wants to go in and shoot a show, a guarantee, if you will, of quality control. You might not like that show, but you are not going to argue with the production values of the sets, the costumes, the talent that's on that stage, the wigs, the lighting, you know, that's all there.
Yeah,
So
every penny is there on the stage.
So that, you know, and when things get to hit the Broadway stage, quite often they've been developed in these regional theaters for up to 7 years sometimes.
Yeah.
So everything is just at the pinnacle. You know, so to shoot something on a Broadway arena is one thing, and to give permission or allow cameras to go in, a lot of times what they're doing, and where Broadway HD has benefited in the pandemic, is with these, you know, concessions that were made or other outside of Broadway, you know, venues, shows that were shot, is that the rights holders get a chance to look at it and say, okay, you live streamed that, but is that really worthy? And we're actually looking at a couple of those things that were done in the pandemic, you know, that you know, with all of this, you know,
so Jason Bergman, if you want to see Six, Bonnie's show, and it might just be your lucky Sunday, just stay tuned to Broadway HD. So because of time, I'm going to have one of you answer each of these questions. So Venki Sharma has been putting out some great questions. And this is one I'm going to push to you, Fabrice. Venki asks, what was the percentage of shows that were paid, and how were the artist bands compensated? Would love to know that from all the panelists, but it's only going to be you, Fabrice, answering this one.
Yeah, it's and thanks. We released statistical data about that. So at the beginning of the pandemic, obviously 0% of the show pretty much were paid. There was some platform like StageIt that offered some tips and donation systems, which is a way to pay basically, and a very respectable way to pay actually. But there was no really ticketed solution that was in place. By July, and by July it was still the case. Now by October, 50% of all live streaming events. So at that time we had 3,000 every day. Fans could log in and they had the 3,000 upcoming events coming up. So from all platforms, DICE, Facebook, Twitch, whatever. 50% of these events were ticketed. So it is a huge jump, and 50% of the interaction we had on BandsInTown. So for as worse as it's statistically true all over the world, 50% of the interaction, which means people buying, you know, clicking and trying to watch, were for ticketed events. So fans, you know, massively actually were, you know, supporting artists and approved the idea of paying for a live stream. Fans were massively recognizing the value of a live stream. Not to say that all live streams should be ticketed. Again, it should be up to the creativity of the artist to decide what they want to do. But there's a monetization opportunity, of course, for the artist with live streaming, because fan for once adopted a new technology that was not all free. And I say for once because if you look at music, you know, for years you had Napster and all the music piracy system, and after 20 years, to take 20 years to the music industry to get to a solution like Spotify that finally made fans recognize that music had some value and that artists needed to get paid. In the live music form, we did not go through that, and it took 6 months, not 20 years, to the fans to accept to pay for a live stream.
Yeah, so a long way in a short amount of time. So Anthony Barocas asks, and I'm going to throw this one to you, Jordan. Do you see greater attendance or value in a scheduled live versus an on-demand recorded viewing?
Not as a general overall, like live is better. It depends on all the factors, on the venue, on the artist for sure, on the artist fan base, if they're super engaged or if it's a more passive fan base. So not like a specific live is better. I think in general, like we're moving as we think more about hybrid and working with venues and working with partners. And it's kind of the example I said before. I'm sitting here in New Jersey and I want to see what's happening right now in LA and right now in London and right now in Barcelona. That's how I feel like we're moving towards as an industry. We'll see what happens, you know, with COVID and Delta variant, and it gets cold in the next couple of months, and you know, things might, at least in New York or on the East Coast, things might change in that way. But for now, I think that we've seen successful live streams both ways. It's successful live, both pre-recorded and also live. But I'm thinking that we're moving towards let's see what's happening right now, making a real vibrant experience again. So like Fabrice was saying before, again, so you get that interactivity. So you can connect with the artist directly, and they can really be creative and really
which is what I mean. We haven't mentioned like Veeps, which of course is more or less acquired by Live Nation, has that level of kind of social interactivity. And Venki asked a question, which I think is really for all of you. So you might want to quickly answer this. Was the streaming executed on a self-serve model, or were artists assisted in the production streaming? Was it remote production? So Fabrice, why don't you start with that question?
Everything is possible. It's you know, everything is possible. It's now, I think a year later, I guess it's even more true. So it could be either self-serve or heavily produced.
Yeah. And Jordan?
Yeah, same. Do dice.fm/TV. You can set up your own live stream, use it as a ticketing platform, or we've been doing lots of deeper relationships.
Right. And Bonnie, obviously you have a slightly trickier act to put up.
Yeah, we're a subscription service, but as I said, we were actually helping people out. But if I could comment on the earlier, and I'm thrilled to hear that in the pandemic, you know, went from like all these live streams that were for free to 50% of them 6 months later. I'm hoping in 6 months from now that everything is ticketed, because it's my feeling that artists need to be paid, you know, where they're huge, you know, a huge part of the economy, and to send the message that, you know, what artists are doing should be free someplace, I just think, you know, defeats the purpose of then what we're trying to do.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
No.
Well, I mean, you know, yeah, go ahead, Fabrice.
If I may, Bonnie, when there are values to free shows for the artist, a lot of artists needs to do album launch party.
Yep, exactly. Brand awareness. So
Right.
it is, but it's to my point of, you know, it's a sample. You're giving away a piece, not the whole thing. So it's not a whole song, a whole scene, a whole show. So I totally agree with you there. So for brand awareness, yes.
No, but look at what, no, there's other models that are not well represented in these panels here, but what John Petruccelli was Bulldog DM does was all the sponsored things, what Grubhub did. So there's a model that will be supported by advertising for sure. And at that case,
sponsors, 100%, I agree, yes.
As well. So it's really open. And I think that the 50% mark that I mentioned was actually a good representation of the fans' interest and agreement to pay, frankly, and that's so fans are ready to pay, but artists can choose whatever, you know, meets their goals actually in their career. And I think live streaming is now part of their life cycle. It's just like you know, going on tour, releasing an album, you know, doing a Q&A, a meet and greet, and I'm doing a live stream, and maybe I know this artist called Melissa Eltridge. She's going on tour. She's a very strong touring artist, but she's also launched a Patreon with a subscription that is super successful, and she's streaming every week. And she did 365 live stream during the pandemic. She streamed every day, right? So everyone, you know, there's no one size fits all, right? It's very important to leave for people to understand that they have to be, from a creative standpoint and from a marketing standpoint, very imaginative to meet their audience and
oh, completely. Yeah, there's an artist here in New York, Amy Spears, a piece I saw years ago at the Slipper Room, and got on her email list, and she was one of the most aggressive users, early, you know, sort of digital marketing artists. So, you know, I mean, I'm sure you guys have a lot of case studies that way. Last question is going to go, and I love this question because it's so essential. Stuart Duffy asks, how do you tackle slow internet speeds at the venues? Ha ha. Call Verizon. Well, that's one way. Right, Bonnie?
Yeah, that's, I'll toss that to Verizon, sure.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, Verizon, if you're listening, you should have sponsored this panel. This went unsponsored. Any of you watching either live right now, all 80 of you, and we got up to around 100, or watching this on demand, if you were even thinking of sponsoring, do it the next time. Shame on you. But yeah, so Stuart got a laugh out of that. But don't you think that that is part of the essential equation here? Right, that we should have better throughput at the venue.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we work with venues very closely to do things like live streaming and artist fan base development, so we can work with our head of production.
Yeah, minor details, right?
Exactly, is to do that. And also when we're working with an artist directly and the artist wants to do us, we're doing a stream at a church, in September, and there's Wi-Fi, like that kind of stuff. We just have to work it's a really custom situation, to figure that, to make sure it works.
We're going to light up the world just because we're now streaming instead of expecting just a casual exchange of atoms. We're doing bits and atoms. So that's beautiful. And that's a great way to wrap. We could have gone on longer, and I want to thank Steve and Eric for giving us this extra time. So you got bonus time here for your time. Thank you, everyone who was here live, and for those who watch this on demand. Once again, big thanks to Bonnie Comley from Broadway HD. Thank you, Bonnie. Look forward to seeing your show, 6 on Broadway. Jordan Gremli from Dice. Thank you, Jordan. We'll definitely be getting together soon live in person. Let's do that, since you and I've never met live. Fabrice, it's so great to see you again. Want to have a chat with you next week. Merci bien. BandsInTown, Fabrice, Sergent. Again, live events in the new normal. Please go and support your artists locally. Please watch a live stream. Please go and see live music and theater. Whether you're in New York, please come to New York, wherever you are. We could have gone on for much longer, but Eric did give us 5 extra minutes. So thank you, Eric.
And my cat finally decided to join one of the panels. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, and everyone else. What a terrific discussion. That wraps it up. Yeah, I'd like to thank, I have to award an Amazon gift card. The winner of the Amazon gift card is Yasmin Ortiz. Yasmin, keep an eye out on your email for that. Thanks to all of our audience members. I wish we would have had time to get to all of the audience questions. We had some great ones in there. And thanks again to Limelight Networks for sponsoring all of Streaming Media Connect. We will be back at 1 p.m. Eastern time for a discussion on monetization models in 2021. Hope to see at least some of you back then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.